Hello and welcome back to AlphaTauri for the final time in 2024, and technically the first time in 2025, as we deal with all the end of season stuff and the driver changes into 2025 and the calendar changes into 2025. First point of order, of course, is the drivers and personnel that are running out of contract, first and foremost. Lawson, 63 going to break his contract. The issue with reserve drivers does remain. So the contract is in. Apparently you can only do it for next season, so I'm hoping this won't be a problem. Alan Permain on board as well, with a nice neat million for his salary as well. So those two holes are now fixed. Now we just have to hope that isn't going to be a problem for the end of the year. Facility-wise, I'm going to refurbish the suspension simulator and just improve the wind tunnel, as that's actually about to tip down in terms of functionality as well anyway, so might as well. Car part test center 12. I think I'll just refurbish that for now as well. We'll leave 28 million there for the end of season stuff. I think we'll be able to use it next season anyway. And crucially, we're well within our cost cap as well as we add more research projects to the end of this year. Oh, Andrea Stella's popped up as well to offer his congratulations. Thank you very much, Andrea. We should actually get more money when we flip over to December as well. So for next year, Dan Fallows is stuck till 2026. Dr. Beer stuck to 2027, and Hamalan end of next year along with Spiny. Don't know if that's the right way to call him. And of course, we are changing our sporting director, who for some reason doesn't count in this email. Meanwhile, Alex end of next year as well, Yuki for till 2027, and Maloney in for next year. I gave him a 2-year contract, by the way, because I do want him to take over from Alex at the end of next year. So I gave him a 2-year contract just in case there's any issues in development or whatever, just in case we need to extend Alex for an extra year or to get someone to fill in for an extra year, then we can maybe promote Maloney the year after. So I gave him a 2-year contract just so it's not too difficult to break if we want to bring him up next year when Alex retires. Just that 1-year security blanket, really. And I don't think he would agree to 1 year anyway. High confidence, which would be handy. Alex's corner's gone up. Yuki's overtaken's gone up. Lawson still exists, unfortunately. Tad awkward, that one. I mean, there's no real point, is there? Just rest, lads. Sure. Get on things at the end of the season. Why not? Completely irrelevant. I've also just decided to upgrade basically every operations facility that was running under and needed refurbishing anyway. It cost about 6 million in total. I think that's money well spent, frankly, in that sense. Memorabilia room up, which would actually make us more attractive to other people. Again, which probably should have done before changing our staff members, but never mind. It's annoying that car delay is available because it would cost us 3 million to break Dan and Fallow's contract. So I think we can't have to wait till the end of next year. We still technically have the 4th best one, but oh, Ben Michelle would actually join, and both of our race engines end next year. There was an option to put like a random bunch more sponsorship obligations in at this point of the season, so sure. All right, that's researched on, and I don't think we'll actually get any further at this point in time. Yeah, I think I'll move out of the way for these. Second in the DHL fastest pit stop. 10 million that's worth. Wow, that's a lot more. Sure. That's an irritating time for that to have come through there. Alex, 9th, 74 points. Yuki, 10th, 72 points. We knew that. 5th, 146 points for us altogether. Team rating up. 19 out of 12 we scored points in. Only failed in 4 races, actually. Doesn't seem that bad when you put it that way. Our team principal rating has gone up to 558. Our team rating has gone up to 570. Ball confidence side, that's worth one. I love the fact that's only worth 1.5 million. Changes are to airflow, I believe, next year over cooling. Now, I believe this is the fun way of doing it. Clicking switch team. We could join Aston Martin if we wanted, but, well, there's a spoiler. Straight off the bat. Red Bull appear to have acquired Charles Leclerc. Max Verstappen remains as the other driver, naturally. So it's Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, with Dennis Hauger as reserve, but I don't think that's a change. They've acquired Ben Michelle as the second race engineer. He is technically better than Hugh Bird, who was their second engineer. Jonathan Wheatley as their sporting director. Is that weird? Does that feel weird? Should he be there? Which means at Ferrari, oh my lord, that's Sergio Perez. Right, that makes sense. Leclerc for Perez. George Russell makes less sense. Where is Carlos Sainz gone? And Teo Pachero remains their reserve driver. I've just seen their race engineers. The technical chief might be a little lacking compared to others, but they might have the best 2 race engineers in the game. Gianpiero Lambiase, who is Max's, and Bono's, who is Hamilton's. Aston Martin, who finished in 3rd, of course. This actually does reflect the order. That is Lance Stroll still, who is contracted till eternity. Kevin Magnussen for retiring Fernando Alonso, I presume. Djokovic remains their reserve driver. So Mercedes is next. No George Russell, of course. That is Carlos Sainz. It is a straight swap for them. Although Hamilton has evaporated as well. That is Esteban Ocon, which makes some sense. So Carlos Sainz in a Merc I mean, he's staring into my soul there. With Esteban Ocon. Now, Mick Schumacher was their reserve driver. He was contracted for more than 1 year, so remains the reserve driver. And they picked up Enrico Cardile, who was a free agent. So, AlphaTauri, we know, that's us, of course. Podium contender is their long-term objective now, by the way. It does say sporting director Alan Permain. It does say reserve driver Maloney, so that does seem to have worked at the very least. So, McLaren, Norris and Piastri. I'm not expecting a change there because we've not seen Norris at least so far. Okay, that's Zhou Guanyu, and that's Norris. So Piastri has moved. Like I say, I wasn't expecting Norris to move because if Norris moves, I would expect him to move to a top 14. But they have dropped Piastri for Zhou Guanyu, who did have a pretty strong end of the season. Typically outdrove Nick De Vries. So that means there's a change at Williams as well for good measure. Alpine, who finished 7th, of course, next. Who we know don't have Ocon. Oh god, what if Piastri's back at Alpine? He's back at Alpine with Pierre Gasly. Okay, Pierre's stuck though. I mean, that's an awkward reunion, isn't it? Because the team principal doesn't change. That's an awkward reunion. Piastri back at Alpine then. They have Jack Doohan as a reserve still. Is Alex Palou still their reserve? I think everyone's reserve was more than 1 year, so they shouldn't have changed. Okay, Williams, who need to fill the gap of Zhou Guanyu, with nobody apparently. Okay, so their first team driver is actually not a face in the game. We'll have to work out how that is afterwards. Nick De Vries remains. So who is that then? Have they promoted their reserve driver, or have they just picked someone up straight from F2? It's Antonio Giovinazzi, who I would have thought... Sorry, I genuinely thought I said Romain Grosjean for a second there as the race engineer. I would have thought Giovinazzi would have had a face in the game because he was in last year's game as a reserve, and I would have thought, at the very least, Giovinazzi as a reserve driver would have had a face. Sauber might be interesting because both Bottas and Ricciardo weren't necessarily spring chickens. I think they had contracts that lasted, but it's highly likely there's still Bottas and Ricciardo here. It is. With Liam Lawson as their reserve driver. Giovinazzi was their reserve driver, if I'm not mistaken. Oh no, I think Giovinazzi was dropped entirely. And that just leaves Haas, who will have lost Magnussen, so that is a new face under that mask. It is 2 new faces, is it? Because Magnussen's gone elsewhere, and Hulkenberg might have been close to retirement. So who have they got? Is 2 non-face in the games. It is Iwasa and Hadjar, with Deruvula remaining as a reserve. I mean, that's galling. Hadjar's just gone straight round, and Iwasa was Sauber's reserve driver. And I think Hadjar's just gone straight from F2 into the Haas seat. I think he was still driving, if I'm not mistaken. Hadjar might have been McLaren's reserve driver. I don't know if I actually put Alex Palou in, but Alex Palou's come back again. But I think Hadjar may have just gone straight from F2 to Haas. We'll check that one afterwards. So I think if I just click on AlphaTauri, I can still just click confirm team, and it acts as if we haven't changed. Fingers crossed. So 33 million in the bank as things stand. Sponsorship obligations. Now, merchandising, obviously, we will do. And we'll do that in the best way possible to give us the most income per rate. Oh, actually, do we need to make sure we've got 20 million? I mean, this is highly irrelevant. That one there. Can I reduce the pit crew's performance? Because that is the sake of, what, 218 grand over the course of the year versus 121 grand over the course of the year. Yeah, we'll do that. And we'll cover those losses with just 5 random days for the factory to have an event, which shouldn't be too much of a problem. I don't know if I'm missing out on things, though, at this point in time. I mean, 19 million will get us an engine, so we might just go with that. If I've made an error, then we'll go forward with that. Cost cap dealt with, mostly negating the technical changes. Season price share for this year would be 54 million, of course. We'll get more per month. That's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping as we start January, we'll get that 4 million to come in to get the engine at least. And nothing changes, I don't think. This does imply points allocation is still a thing in the game. So we stick with Red Bull powertrains. I think they will put us into debt for January, but I think we might get immediately out of debt because we can't do anything with powertrains. Oh, it's assuming 19 million based on the powertrain. That's fine. We'll leave we didn't really too much with the merchandising. It's not really worth going back now. It's only a matter of like 30 grand, I think, per race, I think it was. So it's 19 million on the assumption that's the engine we were already getting. Grand. Okay. Yuki's overtaker's gone up again. I would like him to get control, please. Braking has gone up. Liam Lawson remained on that for some reason. It is Zane. We're good. So in theory, Alan Permain, now in charge of this, has an aptitude of 93. We should be able to get up to a maximum of 93 now. We can. Obviously, bearing in mind there is no actual race until March. You don't actually need to rest your team until March. So whilst I am basically running my team into the ground, they don't actually have morale. They don't have anything like that. They're not about to go on strike by me doing this, because we need to get this as low as possible by the start of the season. Mistakes we can work on. but we'll get the baseline. Doesn't mean we'll go slightly marginally better in this year's pit stop competition with Alan Permain in charge of that now. So it will be, we just kind of get to the edge of 2 seconds by the end of January. It is slightly cheesing the system on that one, but you know, they put it in there, so we'll make it work the way we've got it. It's annoying I can't actually put Yuki Tsunoda's development into something that gives him control and something that isn't already strong, because the defending is lacking there as well, so that's quite nice to have. Whereas the other one you put him on is wet track, which improves smoothness and adaptability, which I suppose actually I'd rather him having overpowered accuracy than overpowered overtaking. So we'll put him back onto wet track in the vein of that will actually get him control again. I think we'll actually put Alex on wheel to wheel a little bit. Get that braking up a little bit. Meanwhile, what's your lacking area? Oh, racecraft adaptability is actually lacking for you along with braking. So something with adaptability and braking preferably. There we go. That's pace short runs. His control is 87, actually, which is better than either of our actual drivers. His control and smoothness are both 87. The two things I want from a driver are better than both of our actual drivers. I think Yuki's smoothness is 87 at this point, but his control obviously isn't. And his development rate is still high. Okay, Maloney's broken. I look forward to that one going forward. So in theory, this is where our car actually stands at the start of the season, and it's not looking great. But then again, it wasn't really that much better at the end of last season. Of course, we actually get less hours, don't we, this year? At least it divides more evenly into 3. So here's the summarised team roster. Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc in the craziest Red Bull lineup you could possibly think of. George Russell with Perez, Ferrari, Aston Martin with Lance Stroll and Kevin Magnussen. True to see how they fare. Carlos Sainz with Esteban Ocon with an 80 rated Mick Schumacher as a reserve driver. They're looking pretty strong, actually, all things considered. Zhou Guanyu with Lando Norris and McLaren. I might actually put Lando in car 1 now. I don't think I need to change the reserve drivers, by the way, either. Oscar Piastri with Pierre Gasly. It's weird having him back at Alpine, but Nick de Vries and Antonio Giovinazzi had a relatively weak Williams lineup, actually, when you think about it. Alfa Romeo with Bottas and Ricciardo, an 80 rated Ricciardo. I think he slipped because of his results last year. Lawson, their reserve. Really should have probably put him in the first seat. I mean, that's ironic when you think about it as well. Ricciardo and Lawson. Iwasa Hajar and Kevin Magnussen at Haas. That's a bug. Derivative is their reserve driver. We'll make sure. Yes. Make sure that's fine. We should be seeing a lot more faces in F3 going forward as well that aren't real people. We'll obviously scout the new additions to that lineup, but yes. So weather forecast accuracy up to 80%. That was actually really lacking towards the end of last year. So there's the upgrade to the wind tunnel through as well as the chassis comes through. I generally don't think I've ever had good news in an email before. A front wing that was going to get here on the 11th of March is going to get here on the 6th of March. So I have taken us all the way to the Bahrain. I'll show you the calendar in a moment. As for the car, we've made marginal gains in some places, really. The brake cooling has slipped backwards quite dramatically, it does seem, just by the fact that was the one that took the least amount of oomph in the regulation changes over the season end, but we've sort of balanced ourselves out overall car performance wise. Second on total weight as well, that's brought us down quite early on that front, and DRS effectiveness, we've moved up the field on that front as well. Top speed we need to work on. We are developing 2 other car parts as well as we speak. The snowball effect of now getting better facilities along with continued expertise gains will gradually work in our favour here. As for the calendar, you can see already it is a bit all changed. Sakir remains as the lead. I was tempted to change that up, but we start in the Middle East, we'll end with the Middle East. We'll stick with that pattern as things stand because I do like the move from Australia to Japan. I was trying to get a calendar that started in Australia, but we're going to start in Bahrain, move to Saudi Arabia, continue with Australia. The first 3 races remain unchanged in location, actually first 4 from 24 to 25. However, Melbourne will be a sprint weekend in 2025. The big changes start now in my attempt to make things a little bit more streamlined in where we go in order. We have moved Las Vegas to round 5 as we go from Japan to America to Canada, back down to Miami, and then make our way over to Europe, start with Barcelona in Spain, the westernmost of the European fixtures. Makes most sense to go from the easternmost of the American races. And then from Barcelona, which is an 88 weekend, Montreal will remain sprint, by the way. We'll move over a little more eastwards to Monte Carlo for Monaco, and then a little bit more eastwards to Imola, which will be a sprint weekend. Then we'll move up to Austria, and then Belgium before the break. Neither of these are sprint weekends, as Silverstone will be a sprint weekend after the carnage that ensued last year at that. And that will, in theory, seal us off for the summer. I figured with the majority of the constructors, with their headquarters being in the UK, it made most sense to end before the summer break in the UK. Because then most teams don't have to move their vehicles really. And we'll pick things up just on the opposite side of the body of water in Zandvoort. Move over to Hungary, and then back down to Italy, and then across to Azerbaijan, Singapore, Austin, Texas, Mexico, Sao Paulo, Qatar, Abu Dhabi rounds things off. The second half not really changing all too much, other than Hungary now being in the second half. That's basically the main alteration. Is we also do lose obviously Las Vegas from the second half of this as well. But Belgium on the 24 calendar was still the last race before the summer break anyway, so that's not actually moved out of the second half. The only real change is Las Vegas for Budapest in that respect, and then a lot of races have changed over in the first half with their locations. But Monza will be ATA, Austin will be a sprint weekend, and Qatar will be a sprint weekend again. That's the sprint weekends for the second half. So, there we have it. 2025 all set up and ready to go. If you've enjoyed the alterations, the surprising driver transfers, some of those didn't really feel like they were premeditated. We knew Fernando Alonso's contract was up at the end of the year. We knew Ocon's contract was up at the end of the year. So it was all likely that Fernando Alonso would retire. I wasn't expecting Lewis Hamilton to retire, and Hulkenberg too for that matter, but let's not forget him in all that. But Perez's contract wasn't up at the end of the year, and yet they still made the change for Charles Leclerc at Red Bull, and it's all changed at Mercedes, and it's all changed at Ferrari as a result as well. Only 2 drivers of the top 4 teams remained at their posts. Max Verstappen at Red Bull and Lance Stroll, obviously, at Aston Martin. They're the only 2 drivers in the top 8. They're the only 2 drivers that stayed where they were in 2024. So it's all changed at the top. We stay firm with our drivers as the 5th best team, apparently. And then down at the other teams, there wasn't too much change, but it doesn't really matter when there's that much switcheroo at the front. 2025 is looking interesting already. 2 races per episode, of course, next year as well. So we'll include Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, the 2 Middle Eastern venues, to kick things off. We'll join you for those next time out. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy this, do like, comment, subscribe. Until next time, ta-ra.